Well, good morning, everybody. Sorry if there's a little bit of background noise this morning. I'm in the truck doing the recording, and where I am in Savannah, there's kind of a busier road behind me, and you're getting a lot of the road noise from. So I apologize for that. We did come through Savannah last night, partly because I'd like to take a different route home. I'd like to go through where some of the drier parts are in the southeast, and then come through the long way of Tennessee, given there's been pretty large precipitation disparity across that region. And so just trying to take advantage of the tail end of a work trip here to see some things. Okay, with all that out of the way, you've been looking at a graphic I know you're all familiar with. It is the Atlantic hurricane and tropical storm activity. It's a histogram. So in other words, it's a count against time here, looking at when we've had historical tropical events. And it's just a reminder that where we currently are in the season is right about here. So we still have 90 solid days of a very active tropical time period ahead of us. And I want to begin here because there's been a lot of discussion this past week and a half in my forecast videos about the fact that we think that August is going to get things rolling again. And so just a reminder, in August, when we look historically, this is just looking at analysis from 1944 to 2020. This is where we typically have our named storm systems forming. So it was a bit rare to see Beryl begin in this area, because certainly back in early July, we don't expect tropical systems to develop here. They typically develop much more closer to the Gulf of Mexico or to the the East Coast. Do take note of the fact that the Caribbean is often not a prime spot for having early tropical development. I'm going to explain why in just a few moments, but this whole region and through here needs to be watched pretty carefully based on history. Now, over the next 7 days, we haven't lost our current problems, which is very dusty air coming off the Sahara, and there is still upper level subsidence over this region, kind of suppressing things. But as we go forward, there's a couple of important things that I just want to make a comment about. I show these maps all the time, right? We look at these ocean temperatures. We've been discussing the very warm Atlantic, especially the very positive Atlantic meridional mode. That's one of the key features that still has me kind of very aggressively forecasting a hurricane season as being so very active. We know that we can often talk about how there's an increase in the wind speed and the trade winds in the Pacific, which often leads to a decrease in wind shear over the Atlantic, and our La Nina is often the cause for making that happen. So you get those strong trade winds, we call that La Nina. That tends to be what reduces wind shear here, and that's of course going on right now as well. We've also talked about the fact that we've got such warm water in these three main places here, and how that seems to be just opening up a ridge kind of as a standing wave pattern. We talked a lot about this yesterday, right in through this area. But there's one thing about this that it's often hard to see, and I want to show it to you in a little bit more up-close view. So I went to the coralreefwatch.noaa.gov product website, and I went to their kind of Google Earth display, and this is the reason I want to talk about this. I did bring my family on this trip. Occasionally I get to do that, and so they tagged along, and so almost every late afternoon I end up at the beach with them. And we began this trip on Amelia Island. That's where the conference was located here. And you note that right now the ocean temperatures there, especially along this coast of this kind of small part of the coast of Florida, are actually even cooler than historical averages. And I'm going to tell you something. I got in the water here, and my first thought was, wait a minute, I thought the Atlantic was boiling. I did. So I came in yesterday, and I'm like, I got to look at this more carefully. Or 2 days ago, excuse me. And sure enough, this is one spot where there seems to be some cooler water. Now, there's probably a lot of different reasons, and oceanographers could probably explain this better, but there must be some upwelling here of some cooler water. The waves are actually bigger as well, but I'll tell you, it felt amazing. Now, we made the trip up last night to Savannah, and after we had dinner at the Crab Shack, if you've never eaten there, you got to do it. We went over to just Tybee Island. It was something, we took the kids there when they were young, just wanted to see it again as we were just kind of getting some rest in the hotel. And my goodness, the water temperature was dramatically warm. In fact, I'll never forget my son's face when he got it. He's 11. He gets in the water, he's like, this is nothing like it was just yesterday. It's so hot. It was almost uncomfortable. And their words, not mine, they've said it felt like a bath. And we often use that terminology in meteorology to discuss the risk of a hurricane season, because if you can get the ocean temperatures above 81 degrees Fahrenheit, you are set up pretty darn well to develop any strength hurricane. And the hotter the ocean temperatures become, the more the stronger the hurricane can be. It's a direct relationship and very strong correlation. So I can vouch, if you've not been to the coast or if you don't live along the coast, how warm these waters are at points. And that's one of just the bigger things that we're concerned about. So with that story out of the way, I want to get back to some of the bigger things we've been watching. The European ensemble has now increased over a broader area the risk of tropical low pressure development. Now this is very low, so I don't want to blow this out of proportion or have any hype over it. You know that we've been watching the southern end of the Bermuda High, though, for any sort of development. And we can see that the European model is just starting to increase that risk. Now, this would fall right in line with the area that we expect tropical cyclone development in August. And is it going to happen right away at the beginning of August? I don't think so. But when we start to see the models teasing at things like this, which we saw yesterday, where we get these little weak waves. They're called African easterly waves. I'm going to show you one as you watch this animation around the high. This wave right here is the one that I want to keep an eye on. So you can see the rotation in this flow. It's very weak, but it's there. And it just continues to show up in the models. And when is it? It's not until we get into August 1st or 2nd or 3rd, but there is a short wave sneaking through there in the tropics that just needs to be watched. There have been some model runs that have pulled this into the southeast as a more mature low, not a massive hurricane yet. I don't know that, but just something. And if that Bermuda High stays where it is, I think this is going to be a good guide on where we could watch tropical cyclone development for a while. Because the Bermuda High, if anything, has only been flexing larger rather than contracting or shifting. And so I just want to keep an eye on what it's going to do to guide tropical systems coming forward. Now, again, I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill here, but that's the little wave that we're talking about. I just want to keep an eye on it at the beginning of August. I mentioned a moment ago that the Caribbean is a less than favorable environment. And you can note that through the Caribbean, there are typically much stronger trade winds. There's sometimes 30 to 40 knots in through this area versus 10 to 15 out in the main development region, or almost non-existent at times in throughout parts of the Gulf of Mexico or the Southwest Atlantic. And that strong wind in through here is often disruptive. It ends up enhancing the shear, which really knocks the potential out of a tropical cyclone from developing. So we'll have to watch that. Okay, next couple of things though. This morning the sun's trying to rise here across the Atlantic, and I just wanted to show you, get a good view early in the morning of the extent of that Saharan dust, and it's certainly there, and the forecasts continue to push these dust plumes across the open Atlantic all the way through the beginning of August. But if you take note now of how dense the smoke is here, remember we're measuring here optical thickness, so this is just extinction of sunlight through the smoke. You'll notice that as we get into August, some of the model forecasts are kind of backing off on just how intense these dust plumes are. And I do want to point, though, that we do have still a pretty consistent forecast that the very end of July is going to get this plume hitting Texas and Louisiana. So that's going to just change the composition of the atmosphere as it comes through. Okay, the other part of the story is in August, we continue to see that there's this wave that moves over this part of the Atlantic, and that's going to take the lid that's on the Atlantic, seen in these warmer colors here right now. It's going to take that lid off. And if Africa continues to produce its easterly wave action, which it does this time of year, we're just going to get into a more conducive environment. So long story short, it just comes down to this idea that, you are here, and we are expecting an increase in tropical activity as we move our way into the month of August. All right. Okay, so let's talk about the rest of the U.S. Last night around sunset, we can see some of the deep convection that was throughout parts of the southeast. This is just an ongoing story with the tail end of the Bermuda High pumping this moisture in. There's a little bit drier air and less smoky air that made it over the Great Lakes, but there's the front to the south of this low that curled up in Ontario and Quebec we've been talking about, and some of the storms along it mixing in with a lot of wildfire smoke. Now, the wildfire smoke that you're seeing through here, which has actually made it all the way to Mexico, is from northern Alberta, northern Saskatchewan, and parts of British Columbia. But at the tail end of this, we can see pretty clearly the wildfires that are in, California, Southern California. In fact, there's some new ones down in Southern California to keep a close eye on. We have Oregon and Washington and Montana, really just prolific wildfire events going on right now, and the southwest monsoon cranking Remember, that's a lightning producer, and this is what oftentimes starts these fires. The issue as you watch over the next 48 hours is going to be the wind that's going to be making these fires so much worse. For example, watch the streaky behavior in the high resolution rapid refresh smoke forecast for vertically integrated smoke content. And you notice that we're getting these kind of tendrils of smoke getting pulled quickly from the west to the east, indicating the wind direction. And unfortunately, that makes firefighting, in the west almost impossible task, given how strong these winds can be. Most of this is from Canada, and it's having trouble getting into the southeast because the Bermuda high is pushing against it, which is where we're getting all of that moisture continuing to hit back and forth and through this area. But we need to be thinking about these winds, because right now, if we just take a look at the wind map here, by middle of the day today, we're looking at some very strong winds coming out of the west, southwest, and that is what's going to be fanning the flames of these fires, making them very, very challenging to fight today. So must watch that. But on the northern side of it, right in through here, we have the low that was coming through parts of British Columbia already, into parts of Alberta and into Saskatchewan. And that is the one that is helping with the firefight there by putting some natural rainfall on top of it. But we have red flag warnings, excessive heat watches, warnings, advisories all throughout the west, getting in now into the northern plains. We've got red flag warnings, air quality issues through the western and high plains, and also down into Southern California, while flood watches extend from coastal Texas, where we've been keeping a very close eye on extremely heavy rainfall in the forecast. And then throughout the Carolinas, which earlier in this month of July were in pretty serious need of rain and in drought. So with all of that, I want to show you kind of the lead system to all of this. This is yesterday, and you are back into British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. And as we watch before sunset, you can see the deep upper level lows. It's actually spinning right there, that came into British Columbia. And out ahead of it was just kicking out this moisture, producing storms and adding rainfall to these areas that are having major wildfire problems. And I think that's going to be an important part about putting those fires out. But back into the United States, I've spent a lot of time looking at these maps lately because there are pockets of drought, and many of you have emailed me about them, that are intensely growing at the wrong time of year. And it's everywhere that you see the red showing up. Now, you just blink at this map, you're like, wow, things look pretty good for most everybody, except for the west where it's really dry. But there's extensive area in through here that's very dry. Pockets of Kansas. Look at this section of our cotton belt. Look at parts of the Delta, Tennessee. That's why I want to drive north and come across rather than go up through Atlanta and only catch this part of Tennessee. I want to get through more of it to see how bad things are in here on my way back to Champaign. Take a look at Ohio to Pennsylvania. There's pockets in the Northeast that need rain. And this is just the 30-day map. Oftentimes we know the atmosphere, I've said this before, is kind of the what have you done for me lately kind of thing. And in the last 2 weeks, you now start to see these broader areas that have missed out substantially on recent rainfall. And what has me very concerned about these areas that are dry, especially in the central United States and in the Northwest, is that when we look out there over the next couple of weeks, those are the areas that we're expecting to get very hot and very dry. You know the narrative, right? We've been watching this big Four Corners ridge start to flex and open into the midsection of the country for several days. And there's going to be this hard divide. I think it's going to live somewhere. If you are along and to the east of that line, storm activity is going to continue. You're to the west of it, we're going to be limited to just the hopeful ridge-riding storms that can come over the top of this into this section of the country and just orbit around the high as it just shifts a little bit east and west with time. That is the mainstay of our pattern as we go forward, looking at who's wet and who's dry. I like this map from the European model initialized this morning. All right, let's get into some of the details of this. There's the trough that's initiating the storms that are going through this part of Canada needed. This is the cool down that we're getting into parts of Washington today. But this heat that's opening up into this section of the country, extremely hot under this ridge, especially in parts of Montana. As we play this forward, this is getting through Friday into Saturday. The movement of that trough is going to be critical to where a front could likely sweep through the upper Midwest, initiating some nasty storms possibly, but also better chances of rain. We're going to take a closer look at that. But watch this. This is this Sunday, getting into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. What I see happening by early next week, in fact, it's going to start happening this weekend, is where that ridge opens, it's going to likely try to stay over parts of the southern plains, mid-south, just the south of the United States. And as we get out there to the beginning of July, we see the reinforcement of a pattern that pushes a ridge into the Four Corner states that opens into the plains, largely because we drop a trough off of the west coast and way off the west coast. So that flow comes around and opens up, and it's going to get very, very hot in this area, which we've been talking about, right? But now we're right up to the point where we can get a little bit more accurate with the numbers, and I'm going to show you those in a few moments. So here's August 4th, 5th, 6th. This is big time state fair time, right? We're getting to that point of the year, and the heat that's going to be with us across many of those state fair states, like right here in the midsection of the country, it's going to get hot. What I want to know is, let's find that 588 line, which is right in through here. Are we going to be getting storms to cascade over the top of this and roll through these growing areas as the heat comes on? There seems to be a possibility for that because the Bermuda High is pumping moisture, but there seems to be a westward extent to where that moisture can make it. And again, that line for me is, I don't know, it's somewhere there. And I know that's a fine dividing line, and I probably just split a lot of you that watch my videos every day on the drier side, which is here, and on the wetter side, which is there. But I think that seems to be where this pattern is really becoming established. So let's take it from here and then walk through some of the near-term stuff. Today's severe storm risk, according to the Storm Prediction Center, let's get an update on this, see if they change it. No. So we're going to be watching the Carolinas and Virginia. We're going to watch the southern end of the southwest monsoon. And just like yesterday, where severe storms rolled through this area, we're going to watch Montana for isolated convection today. Tomorrow, we're going to be tracing out the front and keeping an eye on the Bermuda High and the Four Corners Ridge. That's where our storms are. Same thing for the 27th. This is a frontal boundary that if it can sweep through and start to work against that drought area that's right here in South Dakota. Remember, this whole region flooded in June and has then not been able to get any rain in some places in the month of July. This is a very important front for those folks. Let's take a look at what the high-res NAM is picking up on. Throughout the day today into tonight, there are the isolated severe storms, the scattered storms that will live across parts of the southeast from eastern Texas all the way up to the east coast. The storms around the Four Corners Ridge right now. That's tonight. Playing through Friday morning, Friday afternoon, and evening. Again, this will be the front on which we're going to watch for the risk of those stronger storms. Thankfully, it will linger in this area. It's not quickly moving across, but that front right now is the low that moved through parts of Alberta. It's the tail end of it. We need to see how it delivers moisture as we get into the day on Saturday. But this only goes out 60 hours, so I've only got you through midday Saturday. We will be watching this corridor Saturday evening for some of those stronger storms to get through. Now, sometimes I find it easy. In fact, I do this every day anyway, but maybe I just need to show it to you more often. When I give you these animations from the high-res NAM, just remember, this is the total precip that the model is picking up on out of that. So sometimes I think it's just easier just to look at what's getting put down. The streaky behavior of those storms here, the storms curling around the Four Corners Ridge, and then all of this throughout parts of the southeast as the Bermuda High pumps in that moisture. Okay, bigger picture things. You can now see why I drew that line where I did. It's not only in the artificial intelligence forecast that if you're to the east of this, it is wetter, but it's also there in the NBM. It's there in the WPC, and it's also in the European. But again, see the streaky storms that could set up on the ridge as it kind of opens and closes itself into this region. Here is the GFS, all very similar in this pattern. As you know, there's always model differences, and again, working hard on finishing up this new system of forecasting so you can compare any model to any other at any given time. But I right now still have the code set up for the GFS versus the European. And I want to take note that it is the European model that is wetter here compared to the GFS. In other words, if it's these colors, the GFS is wetter by this many inches. If it's the European, it's wetter by this many. It's the European that's wetter here and also in this corridor. The GFS is wetter in certain spots, and those are key for certain dry regions, but the European model, once again, is the wetter of the two models for many in terms of the back side of where that moisture transport's coming through with respect to the Bermuda High. So that's going to be key to watch. I would like to show you the individual model runs like I normally do. GFS left, European right. We've watched through Friday into Saturday and Sunday. Now, let's park it out here on Sunday afternoon. There it is, right there. That will be the time frame, Sunday afternoon and evening, that I'll be keeping an eye on the risk of storms here. Take a look at the surge of moisture north. That's out ahead of this, increasing the chances for rain in this corridor as well. And as that front sweeps through Monday into Tuesday of next week, we're going to keep an eye kind of on a corridor in through here that could see more of those stronger storms rolling through. That's a pretty common corridor this year, as you can imagine. This is Wednesday into Thursday of next week. Notice the European sweeps another chance of storms through. Right there, could be hitting some of those drier pockets of South Dakota, and then rolls that on through to next Saturday and Sunday. Now, that was a quick rundown of the models, but we always like to look at the probabilities to back this up. And this is the chance at getting an inch of rain in the next 10 days. If we step it up to 2 inches, I'll probably get a new model run in. Yeah, just came in. Let's go back to 0Z. It's funny, when I start recording these, those aren't in. And the moment I do, they're there. I need to work on my timing, I guess. But there's the probability of 2 inches. And if we look at 4, now you can start to see why this area is under flood watch. Same thing for here. But it's that drier side we have to pay attention to. And this is the probability it's staying under 1/10 of an inch. And what's got me very concerned about this time period is the heat that's coming in as well through this entire corridor east of the Rocky Mountains. Now west, we don't expect. It's that time of year it's supposed to be hot and dry. But this region has got me concerned. We'll make more of a case for that in a second. The week 2 precipitation outlook. As you can see, the CPC went another shade darker on their risk of being drier than average. Very clear here. And it's echoing what's going on in the European model as well, while the southeast continues to stay wetter for that week 2 time frame. So that is a important thing, and how long in August that sticks around will be key to how quickly and how well established the heat becomes in that area. Unless something like a big tropical system or something majorly disruptive in the Pacific comes through, I'm really quite stuck on this risk of having this kind of standing wave. Let me go find it again, of where we get heat here, heat there, heat here, and then a wave that sets up right in the middle. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, all because of where these ocean epicenters of heat are. So since we're talking about the heat, let's go have a look at where we've been. July's not been hot here. It's been hot up the coasts, very hot up the coasts, and lately extremely hot in Montana and Idaho. But this has not been where the heat has been for a while. But as we talked about yesterday, that's where it's coming. To finish July and to start August, we are expecting that first week of August to have a high risk of excessive heat according to NOAA. So let's again kind of see how we get there by going to a couple of different maps. Our first one shows that over the next 7 days, we will expect to see evaporation rates range between 2 and some places over 3 inches in a week. If there is moisture to evaporate, that's what its potential could be. So this is very, very hot and very dry. The high temperatures, blow that up a little bit for you. Scorcher today on the border between the Dakotas and Montana, parts of Wyoming, getting down into Nebraska. We work our way into Friday and Saturday. That heat just stays on in this area, but a little cooler in the northwest. Cooler in the west on the whole as the trough digs in and pushes the ridge out. This is all cloud cover driven coolness. But watch this next weekend. This is into Sunday. Northeast is hot too. Monday, look at that heat extending. Getting into Tuesday. Now this is where things get a bit ridiculous. A lot of days here. As far north as, Rapid City, but 101 from parts of West Texas, clear here to South Dakota. And this is next Wednesday. The heat is anchored there, and I think it's going to stick around for a while. The day 5 through 10 shows it, and the day 10 through 15 shows it. So just keeping on this idea, where is it all going? So I've made this case that I think we got these 4 areas of high pressure. And you notice here's the higher than average pressure there. There's the higher than average pressure here. And you can still see that in August there's normal to higher than average pressure there. Is the model perfectly predicting what I showed you with the standing wave? No, but I still think it's going to be there. And you're going, well, wait a minute, this is showing blue. Remember, I'm talking about upper level ridging and the resulting high pressure at the surface. If it gets really hot in through here, we'll actually have lower pressure at the surface because of the heat. okay? But it's where the ridges live in the upper atmosphere that I think are going to be critical. And I can show you those in the model. Let's go to upper air heights. And I want to show you 30-day outlook. There we are. So now you can see it. One, look at the coloring there and there. Those 4 spots. So on the precipitation side of it, let's get a new update here. In fact, let's go to the United States. Get a new update on the 30-day outlook. That is now the trend, going much drier in this area. But as I said, I think there's going to be a line. It's right in through here. Maybe it's even a little bit farther to the west. That if you're along this and east, there are going to be better chances of storms in here than even the models are saying. This extends up into the Canadian Prairie as well. I just think there's going to be a sharp divide. The farther west you go, the drier things are going to be getting with time. And the models continue to be very hot in that area, with temperatures over the month currently forecasting being maybe 7 to 10 degrees above average. So just a lot of concern there. Now, I do want to tell you that I'm giving you a month-long forecast during one of the more unpredictable times of year because of tropical events, both here and in the Pacific, that can disrupt this pattern. And I also want to show you that this isn't the only model in town, right? I know I prefer the European model, but I sometimes show you the CFS V2. And while this model is highly variable, it's trying to break this down by mid-month and bring a lot of storms back into this area. So I just want to let you know that the forecast seems a bit dire, but the reality is that week to week there are pattern shifts, and if anything changes in that, that's why we do these every day. I'll keep you up to speed on if anything changes for the risk of that excessive heat and long-standing kind of drought development issue in the central plains of the United States. So from there, I want to give you another thing that's changed lately. I often show you this figure, the one that's on the left here from the Climate Prediction Center. This is their official forecast. And so what happens with this is that humans are involved. They help set these probabilities using their intuition, their meteorological experience, and it tends to be the best. That's why we trust it so much. This is the probability of having La Nina or El Nino or neutral conditions develop. But sometimes the modeling shows a little different scenario. And that's why I want you to look at this particular figure. It's interesting to note that the mid-July forecast runs are actually suggesting that the probabilities are not nearly as high as the forecasters. Now, what do we trust? We trust the forecasters. I'm one of them. We trust that we can see the things evolving that the model may not have the ability to resolve. And that's why that's why we exist. So just take note, though, that the probabilities are significantly lower in the models, and we just need to continue to watch that because we think they're biased a bit too low. But it's a possibility, and we are, of course, fallible, and we could screw this up too. So let's keep an eye on this very carefully. I do want to mention, again, that other wild card. We did watch yesterday the tropical storm, typhoon, go right over the top of Taiwan. And as we play this forward, the remnants are getting into Southeast Asia. They're getting into China. They're getting into, eventually, we think, the Manchurian Plain, which is here. And as this moves north, this could be a feature that I think reinforces low pressure in the Bering Sea. Now, what's the significance of that? If we drop the pressure in the Bering Sea, this is going to help the heat stay in the central United States. I think that's going to be the case. So as we go forward, let's just take a look at it. There is the tropical system. There's all of the extremely wet weather throughout the southeastern part of Asia, getting back into India. Take note of the better chances for rain in Ukraine and sections of Russia, but the driest and hottest parts of Russia are here. And just to be clear, the area I just circled, this little spot, you could fit all of Illinois and Iowa in. That's a big area. So it's a very dry area that's right in here. Check the NDVI values this morning. They're also very, very low. Other things to think about, just global temperature pattern over the next 10 days. We've talked a lot about the heat that's moving here into the central United States with time, but it's getting cooler here. So just something to point out. All right, that's all I got for you. We'll pick this up one last time tomorrow, and we'll take a little break this weekend and come back in next week with more forecast videos. So I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks.